one thing we haven't covered a lot on this show is UFOs during wartime. So having my guest on, Mr. Mack Maloney, who's on with me right now, is really fascinating to me because I haven't had anybody cover this subject. And, thank you so much for being here tonight, Mack. I really do appreciate you spending your time with us and talking to me and my audience about this fascinating book you wrote, UFOs in Wartime, what they didn't want you to know.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Now, before we actually get on the book, you've written other books before. Catch us up to what you've written in the past and how you got to where you are writing this book.
Well, I went to school for journalism and went to Emerson College for filmmaking. But when I got out of Emerson, the first job I got was as a sports reporter. So I worked in a newspaper for a couple of years. And I worked for General Electric as a PR guy for a couple of years. But while I was there at GE, I got a chance to help someone else co-write a book, and that was in the middle 80s. And that book was published, and from there I was able to get other book contracts. And so I've been writing full-time since about 1987. I've written probably about 40 books or so. I'm not even sure myself. But, most of them have been military fiction books, like Tom Clancy books, and a few science fiction books thrown in. But about 3 years ago, I was having lunch with my editor, and we were just talking about UFOs, and I told him how I'd always been interested in UFOs, and I also was into things, military things, and I just mentioned to him offhand that it seems like UFOs show up a lot, either during wartime or as we're getting ready to go to war, and he thought that'd be an interesting idea for a book, but it would have to be a nonfiction book, and everything I had done up to this point was fiction. So he said, would you want to do that as a nonfiction book? And so I said, sure, and so that's what we did. And the book came out in December, and seems to be doing okay.
It's a nice little book, and it has, of course, a little section with pictures for us lamers who need pictures in books, so you have to have some visual. But it's a good read, and it's an interesting subject. A lot of people don't realize how many sightings there have been over the years during wartime. We're talking about World War I, World War II, Vietnam, even the Gulf War. There's been a lot of sightings over the last 100 years, hasn't there?
Oh yeah, it really comes. When I was doing the research, before, when I first started the book, I should say, I like I said, I had this feeling that it just seems like there seems to be a lot of UFOs, coming around when we're at war, and I didn't know whether it was because, now we have airplanes flying around up there, and just more opportunity for people to see them, more opportunity for people on the ground looking up into the sky. But it really does seem like they show up just as the war is about to start, and then hang around when the war is being fought, and it's almost like they're observing us. They're observing us, watching us as we, go to war.
Now, I was joking around earlier before we had you on about the possibility that maybe some of these soldiers were a little bit, high on the drugs. Cause,
in Vietnam, that was certainly the case.
Yeah, because they're doing all kinds of stuff in Vietnam, let me tell you. But, that could explain, obviously, some of the sightings, during the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And that could explain even, early on, maybe World War II, some of the sightings, but not all of them. Let's talk about some of the real concrete ones where there's such a mass sighting where you really can't say, well, he was just high on PCP or something. Right.
Well, just for instance, take the Foo Fighters of World War II. That's what they called UFOs during World War II. And, there's lots of incidents in the book, and we only were able to cover a few of them where, especially at night, the British would bomb Germany at night, and the Americans would bomb during the day. But especially at night, there's lots of stories about these British bombers would be right in the middle of bombing some city and, getting shot at with anti-aircraft guns and fighters shooting at them. And all of a sudden they would look out in their wing and there'd be a UFO out there just riding right along with them. A lot of times these UFOs would follow them back to their bases in England. And then when the Americans started kind of joined the war bombing Germany in late 1942, their crew started reporting the same thing, and people really didn't know what was going on. A lot of people just assumed they were Nazi superweapons, but what we didn't know then was that the Nazis were seeing these things too, and they thought they were our secret weapons. So, these people who are up there flying airplanes, they're not high, they're not drunk, they're not, they're, if anything, they're the best observers we have because they're in the middle of a battle, and they're not in a position to, like, create a hoax or be delusional or anything like that. I mean, I think they're right at the height of their senses at that point. So there's lots of instances in World War II, and lots of instances in Korea too, where lots of UFOs were seen in Korea as well.
What are some of the most talked about, I guess, sightings during wartime?
Well, there's so many of them. There were, for instance, there's one in World War II in the Pacific Theater. A lot of people too make the mistake thinking that Foo Fighters were just strictly something over Europe, and there's always this kind of strange connection to the Nazis. People want to pretend that these were Nazi weapons, but we pretty much prove in the book that they weren't. But in the Pacific, there was this incident where there was this battleship, the USS New York, and it was in the off of New Guinea with two other escort ships, and they were heading towards the Battle of Iwo Jima. It was kind of towards the end of the war, and they saw this object coming towards them on radar, and so they thought it was a Japanese airplane going to attack them. But so they went to battle stations. But then the object appeared right over this battleship, and it was a flying saucer. It was a saucer-shaped flying saucer. So, and it stayed over the battleship for 3 hours, and it wasn't just hovering there, because all this time the battleship is moving about 15 miles an hour to the north with these two ships on either side of it. And this object just kind of kept pace with them. And, no airplane can go 15 miles an hour. And if it was a balloon, it wouldn't have been able to stay on course with them. And they could see it quite clearly. In fact, at one point they started shooting at it, and, had no effect. So for 2.5, 3 hours, this thing stayed with them. And then all of a sudden, disappeared. There's a number of stories like that happened in the Pacific, where these UFOs would just seem to, find a ship, and just pace it, just kind of stalk it in a way for 2 or 3 hours, and then boom, in the blink of an eye, it was gone.
And what are the possibilities that they're just mistaking airplanes from really far away?
Well, see, that's the thing, is that if it was an airplane, in the case of the USS New York, it was literally right overhead. In fact, everybody on this battleship, there's probably 3,000 people on the battleship, saw it at some point. And then the people on the two escort ships. If you can imagine it staying in position as the ship moved at 15 miles an hour, as I said, there's no airplane that can go 15 miles an hour. I mean, that's way too slow for an airplane. And if it was some kind of balloon, it would have just gone with the wind. This thing stayed with it for almost 3 hours, and that's a long time. We have stories in there about, there's an aircraft carrier called the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which was actually launched after World War II. And in its 30 years of service, it was constantly trailed by UFOs, no matter where it went. At one point, it was off the coast of Brazil. Another time, it was at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Another time, it was out off of the coast of Norway. 2 or 3 different times. Another time, it was off the coast of Florida. For some reason, UFOs just tagged along with this aircraft carrier. The last time it was in the Mediterranean. Wherever it went, UFOs seemed to go, and no one, of course, knows why, but the only clue is that it was the first U.S. ship to have nuclear weapons on board. That's another thing. UFOs really are attracted to our nuclear weapons, whether it's on ships or planes or ICBM sites. There's something about nuclear weapons that attracts UFOs as well.
Well, they've shut down a couple of missile sites over the years, or at least that's been the report. There's been, I mean, it is something to think about, that when there is nuclear technology around, they are sighted, and again, that goes back to, maybe, are they spying on us? I mean, do you think that, or do you believe for a fact that they are aliens in these UFOs, or could they be our crafts that we've back engineered, or stuff that we have? I mean, what do you really believe?
Right. I don't think that they're reverse engineered craft that we have captured. I don't think anything happened at Roswell. There's a chapter in the book about that. I just think that this whole idea that we have these crashed UFOs, and we're reverse engineering them, and we're actually flying these things. I don't buy that, because if that was the case, then why would you go through this whole charade of NASA and the space shuttle and all that stuff? What's the point of that? If you have the capability to fly like UFOs fly, leave the atmosphere and stuff. What I believe is, and I'm not the first person to have this theory, but I really came to believe this as I was doing the research, is that I think there's a good chance, an even better chance, that UFOs are time travelers, that time travelers from our own future. And I think they're just coming back. It could be, I'll tell you, it could be just as something as simple as they're tourists. They're tourists coming back and seeing history as it's being made. Because when you, like I say, I was just like immersed in this for 2 years doing this book. And what always seems to happen is, as I'll just go back and say that it seems like when you're getting ready for war, when you're at war, lots of UFOs show up. And it's almost like they just want to be there to see history as it's being made. And
Interesting.
And it's like, supposing if we had that ability now, I mean, there'd be a lot of people who go back and see how the Civil War was fought, see how the Battle of Troy was fought. I mean, a lot of people would do it. And it might be something just as simple as that. I think that has there's a little bit more evidence pointing to that than the little green men from Mars theory.
Well, what about, subterranean worlds? I even joked about earlier about, the journey to the center of the Earth. My good friend Dennis Crenshaw, the Hollow Earth Insider himself, has talked for years about, them, the UFOs coming from the center of the Earth. Is that a possibility that maybe there's something more to that we don't know about?
Well, it's not impossible, and I'll tell you why. There's two sections of the book that deal with, one of them is called The Ghost Flyers of 1933, and the other one, The Ghost Rockets of 1946. And real quick, the Ghost Flyers of 33 was that people way, way up in this very isolated part of Sweden in 1933 and 1934 saw these very strange airplanes that made no sense. They were huge. They had 8 engines. They had big searchlights hanging off the bottom of them, and these things would circle for hours, and just a really crazy story. I mean, it's really better to read it in the book, because, I could tell you all about it and you still wouldn't get all the craziness involved in it. But it was way up near the Arctic Circle. And then that was in 33, 34. And then 46, after World War II, in just about the same part of Sweden, people started seeing these rockets, which they call the ghost rockets, which, if you read the description of them now, it's the exact description of a present-day Tomahawk cruise missile. But no one had the technology to have cruise missiles over Sweden in 1946. But because that was so close, let's say, to the Arctic and the North Pole, it was almost like, well, why would these strange aircraft be over this part of Sweden unless, for some reason they might have some secret base, some hidden base somewhere. I can tell you that there's a lot of people now are coming around to believe that UFOs are actually USOs, unidentified submerged objects. There's lots of stories of people seeing these things come out of the water, and hey, maybe that's where they hide. We just don't know.
They still could be time travelers to just
the
hanging out under the water.
Yeah,
time traveler theory is an interesting one, though. Let me tell you, it's an interesting one, and I've heard it mentioned before. I've also of course a lot of people have heard the interdimensional travelers. That it could be interdimensional beings, which, if you believe in Einstein's time and space theories, they would almost have to be interdimensional beings, because time really couldn't go inward or backward in time. You would go into another dimension, or the way I'm not exactly sure how he phrased it, but it was one of those things where you could only go into another dimension, parallel universe type of deal. You
right.
Go in your own timeline.
The latest theories is that we don't live in a universe, we live in a multiverse. We are one of just an infinite number of universes, and that things are happening because you have an infinite number of universes. There are universes that are exactly like ours, except there's an E on the end of your name. You know what I mean? Right. And then there's another one where there's an E on the end of my name, and everything else is the same. So if you're somewhere in the far-flung future and you want to go back and see how things are made, you don't come back to our time right now, but you come back to a time that is just almost exactly the same as our time, except for one little thing, and that's why people say with the time travelers thing, well, how come there isn't a million people at the crucifixion, for instance? Okay,
Right.
Where are all these time travelers at that? Well, maybe they were in maybe they went to some other time, to watch it, or maybe they know that maybe there's just so many different universes that they have their pick of. That there's only 10 of them at each one. I mean, when you really think of that whole multiverse theory, the possibilities of everything literally are infinite. So the time traveling thing, and Einstein said he couldn't prove you could travel in time, but he said it wasn't impossible, right. And he had the answers to everything else. So I tend to kind of believe him.
He definitely was one of the smartest minds that this planet's ever produced. That's for damn sure. It's funny. The more science evolves, the more we're kind of proving that he was right about just about everything.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
It's funny. He lived so long ago. Can you imagine what Albert Einstein would do with today's technology?
No, I don't know. I mean, would he be lost in it? Would he be lost in it, or would he just? He'd probably figure it out really quickly. Look at what this guy Stephen Hawking has done. Yeah, guy he can move one finger, and he's a worldwide celebrity. It would be interesting to see what Albert Einstein would do with the internet, things like that.
Well, let me ask you. Now, we're talking about UFOs being perhaps time travelers, perhaps interdimensional time travelers. In your mind, then, do you think there is life in other planets in our own dimension, in our own space and time, or are we all alone?
I can't imagine us being alone because it seems like every day they find out that there's actually more planets. I mean, now they're able to see other planets in other solar systems, and
that's right.
Yeah. And they're able to kind of postulate that, well, if we can see this number of planets and this star and there's so many stars, I mean, now that there's a theory out there now that there's something like 1 trillion planets just in our own galaxy.
God, that's a lot of planets.
And that there are 200 billion galaxies that they know about.
Jesus.
I mean, if we are the only people in this whole thing, then we are special. You know what I mean? We are very, very special. I just can't believe that we would be the only ones,
What are the possibilities, though, that life in another galaxy could make its way here? Why would they even make their way here to begin with? With all the other planets, but what are the possibilities? It's so far away. The distances are just amazing.
Well, see, I think what you said earlier is right. Is that it's not? It can't really be space travel because the distances are just so vast. So it has to be some kind of time travel, interdimensional travel. Some way they found that if you go from this dimension to another dimension, you're suddenly at another spot without traveling at all. I mean, it can't possibly be, space travel can't be the way that we go into orbit or we go to the moon. I mean, it just takes millions of years for you just to get to, out of just to the next star. So it has to be something different. And maybe they've just figured it out because the universe has been around for almost 14 billion years. Earth has been around for about 4 billion years. So there might be other planets out there, other civilizations. And mankind's only been around for about, really, in modern man, about 100,000 years, or maybe a little longer. There could be civilizations out there that are 1 billion years old, and they'd be very, very, very advanced.
And all those numbers are, really theory at this point, because we really can't determine in reality how old things are. I mean, science likes to say, yeah, the Earth is this old and the galaxies are this old, but in reality, we really don't know. Right.
Right, and all time is relative to this Earth. I mean, we measure things by years old. Well, years old, a year happens to be how long it takes us to go around the sun.
Right.
I mean, it's all relative to us. It has nothing to do with everything else out there.
And well, again, going back to why would they want to come here if they are coming here? I mean, are you sold on the theory that they're just coming here as visitors to kind of observe these important times?
Well, I can tell you this. I know that whatever UFOs are, they just seem to be here to observe us, wherever they come from. There's a lot of evidence that they show up, when there's going to be some kind of historic event, not just war, a lot of times in war. But, someone was telling me the other day that, for instance, around July 4th, lots of UFOs are seen. I'm thinking, well, that could also people be seeing fireworks, but like July 3rd, a lot of them are seeing, and July 2nd, like it's almost like they're getting ready for historic events,
for 2012.
Yeah, or something
December
like
23rd.
that. So it seems like they have this, kind of a pre-notion to show up when things are going to happen, and this whole idea of that, they just want to see history as it's going to be made. I don't know. That's not a bad theory, to tell you the truth.
Now, do you think there is something to December 23rd, 2012, the Mayan calendar?
I don't know that much about it, but I did read the other day that when they were calculating that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when they were calculating when it was going to happen, they didn't take into account the leap year. So the time the Mayans said it was going to end was actually like 7 months ago, and we're still here.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I saw a bumper sticker the other day. It said the Mayans better be right. Which is
it's funny. There's been so much, hype built into, the Mayan calendar and the possibility of Planet X and Nibiru and this, this planet that has a race on it that maybe they seeded life on Earth. Mm-hmm. Zechariah Sitchin wrote a lot of books on the subject. And
oh yeah, yep.
He got a lot of people involved and a lot of people, hyped on the subject. How real do you think, are the chances of there being a Planet X out there that we just don't know about yet?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, it could very well be. They're really finding a lot of different things out there just in the past few years, and for something like that to escape our attention, I don't know. I know that they're going to launch a satellite very soon where, and it might be called the James Webb satellite. I'm not sure exactly the name of it, but what it's going to be able to do is once it gets up in orbit, it's going to be able to focus on these planets that they are finding now, and they're going to be able to it's going to be able to determine what's in their atmosphere. And if they find an atmosphere that has carbon dioxide, which carbon dioxide is if I'm correct on this, is the result of we make carbon dioxide, as a result of us burning fuel and that kind of stuff.
Right.
If they find carbon dioxide in certain quantities in the atmosphere of these planets, then to them that will be a pretty good indicator that there's some kind of civilization there, And this thing is going to be launched within the next few years. So, within the next 4 or 5 years, we might actually have scientific proof. We might not know what kind of a race they are. We might not know what they look like or anything, but we may have proof that there is life on other planets. We just don't know, as I say, what they look like or what they're up to. So, we might find the answer to this, sooner than we think.
Do you think that the way we're going to find life is going to be just by detecting it like that, or do you think we're actually going to one day make contact with some kind of alien race?
The way things are going, I think that the chances of finding it first will probably be through like a satellite or something like that.
Right.
I mean, will the day come when a UFO lands on the White House lawn? I don't know, but going back to the time travelers theory, when you think about it, is like people are always saying, well, why is there no definitive, really clear, crisp picture of a UFO? Especially now that everyone's running around with cameras in their phones. Why don't we have this one picture? Well, if you think about the time travelers theory, they know, if they know the future, they know that they won't be, quote unquote, found out until, let's say, July 1st, 2018. Okay, so they know they can do anything they want up till July 1st, 2018, because they're not going to get caught no matter what. I don't know. Will we have a kind of the day the Earth stood still moment where they just come down and start talking to us? Or I think that it's more likely we're going to find evidence of life through one of these satellites, through one of these scientific things.
I think microbes on a meteor or maybe on a moon somewhere.
Something like that.
Yeah, right. I think that's how they really will start the announcement of some kind of life. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, NASA, for example, you mentioned earlier that NASA, why would, NASA be there if there was, all these aircraft that we were back engineering, if we had this technology? NASA is a perfect cover for any black budget projects you want to have that you don't want the population to know about. You would have a NASA, NASA, never a straight answer. That's pretty much what they do.
Right.
They manipulate the media. They tell you that things are this way when in reality they could be a completely different. And that's the best. How does an illusionist pull off an illusion? He does a trick with one hand, and then the other hand is doing the actual illusion. Right. That's what NASA do. A lot of us in the UFO community, that's what NASA really represents. They're the other hand of the illusion going on.
Well, I would, if I could just give you my opinion on that, okay?
Sure.
I don't think NASA is smart enough to do that.
I hope they are. They better be smart enough. These guys, we're spending a lot of money on their technologies.
Right. But just as an organization, they're not this well-oiled machine that people think they are. For instance, I just found out the other day that, the space station, okay, that they've been building for years, and that's what the whole space shuttle was about. That was completed 6 months ago. I mean, I just found out the other day that it was completed about 6 months ago. There was no big announcement. There was no kind of, celebration or anything having to do with it because NASA is just so bad at putting the word out. And then there's another thing, too, is that years ago, and I don't know if this is still the true or not, but years ago, Sports Illustrated had a standing offer of $1 million to anyone connected with the NFL who could prove that an NFL game was fixed. Okay? And no one ever came forward, which to me proves that NFL games aren't fixed. Though, frankly, I bet on a few that look pretty fixed, but that's another thing. Okay?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, okay. If NFL games were fixed back then, this is going back 25 years ago, someone would have come forward, claimed that million, and proved it. Well, these days, that kind of idea of paying people to leak stuff, now it's everywhere. So all it would take is one person in NASA to come forward with dramatic evidence to say NASA is involved in all these kind of black operations and keeping the real truth from us like that. And there'd be someone out there who would give him $10 million. But see, there
have been people. Edgar Mitchell has come forward, claiming that, NASA is keeping secret some of the stuff they're keeping from the public will shock you. There's aliens out there. Edgar Mitchell, one of the astronauts who walked on the moon, has come forward.
Right. No, I just sent him a copy of the book. But the thing is that you would need someone who would really have to come out with absolutely outstanding proof, not just saying, well, we saw aliens up there. They would have to come with pictures, with videotape.
Yeah, but you got to remember, pictures, videotapes nowadays, all that stuff won't stand scrutiny because all that is easily manipulated, easily fixed, easily.
Well, that's what I mean. It would have to be concrete evidence that would be just undeniable. And I think that there would be people out there who, if they had the opportunity, they would, or someone in the military, or someone on the other side of this NASA black operations, someone out there would I believe these days would talk, and no one seems to do it. But not everyone is good at keeping secrets, and not everyone is good at keeping their mouth shut, especially when there's some kind of monetary pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I don't know, I don't know. I just think that. I just can't believe that the organization that is NASA would be. I mean, they can barely put, the space shuttle up all these years, and now they don't even. Now they're not even doing that. I just can't believe that they would, on the other hand, be also involved in all this kind of murky activity. I just don't see it. But hey, listen, I'd be glad to have my mind changed on it, but I just don't see it.
I have seen enough evidence, I think, to believe that NASA has covered up a few things. For example, there's been documented videos, talking about pictures where they've airbrushed. Towers and all kinds of different objects they've been on the moon. Just things like that. You look at it and you're like, well, could NASA be covering some stuff up that we've seen on the moon? It doesn't necessarily have to be extraterrestrial that they're covering up. It could be something very Earth-based related. Maybe a few thousand years ago we had a race on this planet of human beings that were space travelers.
Right. Why would they cover that up, though? What would be their motive of covering that up?
Well, let's just say maybe the secrets of the human race.
Mm-hmm. But
if you put religion into the picture,
right? Well, that is the bugaboo. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly.
Right. In fact, there's a story in the book where we learned that Winston Churchill was shown a picture of a Foo Fighter during World War II, and this is supposed to be one of the clearest pictures ever of a Foo Fighter. It's taken by a reconnaissance aircraft, British reconnaissance aircraft, and when he saw it, the first thing he said was, "We have to embargo this picture for 50 years because if people see it and they know, obviously this is technology not of this earth, wherever it came from." He says it would ruin all religion.
Exactly.
He says it would wreck civilization. It would ruin all our religions because religion is really the glue that keeps civilization together. But as we were just saying about time, religion is relative to our planet. And if people started thinking, well, there's people on other planets, who's their savior and who's their Allah and who, you know what I mean? Then whoa, boy, everything kind of goes out of control. So, for that point where, would the powers that be want to keep us all kind of civilization still glued together? That I will agree with you on.
And not only religion, this is another reason why I think Zecharia Sitchin was so scrutinized, because if we've, come to find out, for example, that we are, on this planet because of an alien race came down here and seeded us, like the story of the Nibiru and the Anunnaki. Let's say that we have something on the moon that belongs to us, that we left there from our ancestors, the aliens, where they came down and seeded us. The Anunnaki, the Nephilim, all these stories from antiquity, that might be true. Let's just say that's the reason why they're hiding that. It makes perfect sense why they would hide it. I mean, it would be earth-shattering for us to find out that our gods are alien beings. For most of us who don't know it already.
Well, that would be earth-shattering. I agree with you 100%. I mean, that would be almost a good reason. I mean, a selfish reason, but a good reason for the establishment, let's say, to keep that news from us. But the question is how long are you going to keep it from us? What's the point? What's the end game in something like that? Money is always the motive. I mean, I think there's also a good chance that I don't believe that the U.S. government knows what UFOs are. I know that they know they exist because they do exist, but I'm not sure they may probably have more evidence of their existence than they're telling us, but I'm not really sure they know what they are. But if they do, one of the reasons they might be keeping that from us is that, whatever the power source is that makes UFOs go and do the things that they do is obviously, it's not oil-based, let's put it that way, okay? And, I mean, the oil companies run this country, they run the world, and they would not want that kind of revenue stream taken away from them so quickly. So that's a good reason. I would buy that reason for keeping UFOs a secret, is that, the oil companies don't want to wreck the good thing they have going now by us discovering another power source,
Well, yeah, not only that, and remember, let's just say we do have technology that crashes here from another race and we're back engineering it. We're not going to exactly figure out how everything works right away. This is alien technology. How could we interpret alien technology? It's going to take our best minds many, many years, maybe even hundreds of years, before they could, recreate their technology. I mean, it's foreign to anything that we could even comprehend. So let's just say that Roswell did happen, and we did recover an alien craft, and we did start to back engineer it. Around that time period is where a lot of the reports came out of, us reporting UFOs, flying saucers. It was around the 40s, the 50s. That's when it really got hot, in that time period. So it makes perfect sense that, we were maybe experimenting on some stuff and we have not perfected the technology because, again, we're talking about foreign technology, not from our country, but from our planet. How do we interpret something that doesn't even belong to this planet? You know what I mean?
Well, see, there's the thing, too, is that, I've been doing a lot of research lately on S4.
Right.
S4 out at Area 51, and the whole Bob Lazar story, and so on and so forth, right? And I mean, that stuff I don't believe at all, because, and that's the whole idea of that. We have UFOs, and we're in league with aliens who are on this planet, and they're helping us. Well, if you go with that story and you believe that there are aliens here, we have the UFOs, and they're telling us, they're teaching us how they work. Well, the whole Bob Lazar thing happened more than 20 years ago. So, why don't I have gravity amplifiers in my Honda? You know what I mean? We would have had them by now if the aliens are telling us how they work. So I just don't get that. I don't buy that whole thing that, Dulce Mountain is, full of aliens and all that jazz. Do we have, evidence of crash saucers? Do we have film? Do we have, I can guarantee you the U.S. military has film and lots of photos of,
yes.
of UFOs. But the question is do they know what they are? They know they exist, but do they know what they are? That's the big question. And I don't know. I go 50-50 on it. Sometimes I really think they have no idea what they are. And that's what they're not telling us. They don't want to tell us that they don't know that there's something out there they can't protect us from.
I think when it comes to the immediate government, I think you're absolutely right. The president, vice president, maybe even Congress. I don't think any of them are aware of what may be going on. Because remember, when we're talking about the UFO phenomenon, we're talking about something that started, 80 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, when it started to really populate. And if there has been secret societies that over the years took the Brookings Report and it took that, the whole phenomenon seriously, and they, started doing secret government UFO stuff with what was going on, the people in power now will have no idea if there is a secret government running the show and kind of are the ones that are behind pulling the strings on the whole alien cover-up. Then the current government really wouldn't know. So asking the president to be the disclosure president, as David Icke always does, wouldn't work.
Right. I mean, that whole thing.
He has no idea.
Right. I mean, as you say, that's a good term for it, the present government, because, the present government in this country, it changes either every 4 years or every 8 years. Let's face it. It doesn't go on more than 8 years. And there are definitely secrets in this country. And I know this for a fact because just from too long of a story, but I do know some people work in U.S. intelligence agencies, and they will tell you that everyone thinks that the president is cleared to know everything. And if he found out something, he could probably say, okay, I want to know about this. But he's not told everything. Okay, he's not told everything. And that's to his benefit, too, because, if you were Obama right now, I mean, would you really want to know about UFOs? Because if you do, and someone asks you a question, then you're forced to answer it. Okay. If you don't know about it, you have that thing called plausible deniability. And he can just say, I have no idea about UFOs, and he'd be telling the truth. It's not like no one has told him. It's that he didn't want to know. He doesn't want to know, especially these politicians who are so single-mindedly, all they want to do is get reelected, I mean, that's their whole purpose in life is that, they want to be popular, they want to be loved, they want to be reelected. And, all this, UFO jazz, for a lot of them, it's like, man, I don't want to know about that.
Well, it's not only that, it's also, remember, this is career suicide. If you start talking about UFOs, presidential candidate Kashinik a few years ago, admitted that, he's seen a UFO, and look what happened to his presidential campaign.
Right, yep.
What's happened to him since?
You're labeled as a kook. That's the way, that's the atmosphere that the CIA actually started in the early 50s. There was a program out there that they wanted people anyone who reported a UFO to be, identified as a nut, as someone who's a hoaxer, or a delusional, or a religious fanatic, or whatever like that. They wanted to do that because they didn't want lots of people reporting UFOs because on one hand, they didn't like the famous sightings over Washington D.C. in 1952. 2 successive weekends in the summer, UFOs showed up over the White House, over the Capitol building, and so many people saw them that they called the Pentagon, they called the White House, and they jammed up all the phone lines. There was no communications between those 2 very important buildings. It would have been a perfect time for the Russians to attack us. So the CIA came up with this idea through the Robinson Commission of, making sure that anyone, or trying to put it out there, that anyone who reports UFO was considered a nut. And they thought that way they would kind of tamp everything down, and they would not the Russians would not be able to fake a UFO sighting and jam up our phone lines. That's what that whole thing started on. I mean, now military people, they'll tell you stories off the record, but they won't go on the record. Airline pilots will tell you stories that'll make your eyes spin, but they won't go on the record because as you say, they know it's career suicide.
It is. I mean, it's really, you're hanging yourself if you even admit, or if you even are pro ufology, and if you're a politician, you're hanging yourself in the media. That's it. It's over for you. It's a wrap if you even come out saying anything like what Kashinik said.
Right.
It's a shame, and people still roll their eyes. You see it when there's a CNN reported of a UFO or whatever, or a mass sighting. Whenever they report anything on the news, they always do it with a little laugh, a little snicker. It's still conditioning the public to think it's a joke, which to me, that's the perfect way to keep a cover up.
Yeah.
If everybody believes it's a joke,
then
nobody's going to take it serious. It's a joke, exactly.
51% of them believe it's a joke. That's all you need,
Right.
See, I'll tell you, my pet project is there's a way that you can actually change that. And what it is that, and this started when other UFO researchers would tell me that a lot of times when they will go to these conventions or speaking engagements, is that military veterans will come up to them before or afterwards, and what they'll say is, I wish I could tell you what I saw, but I can't because I was told not to talk about it. My own brother, my older brother, was in the Air Force and saw a UFO and had this really very close encounter, but he was told not to talk about it, and he told me very little about it. Well, there's probably hundreds of thousands of military people out there who saw UFOs during their service time and were told not to talk about it. My idea is what we should do is all the UFO researchers and people like yourself and people who are really interested in UFOs, we should force the military to give a blanket amnesty to every person in the military who saw a UFO and was told not to talk about it. Okay, give those people a blanket amnesty. Nothing's going to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to your pension. Nothing's going to happen to you if you're still in the military. Come forward. Tell us about UFOs that you've seen, and think of the avalanche of new sightings we'd be able to study, we'd be able to look into, and maybe from all that new information, we'd be that much closer to figuring out the UFO puzzle, okay? On the other hand, if the military doesn't go along with something like that, then we know that they're hiding something. So it's a win-win situation, and there's actually a precedent for this, and the precedent is that the people who got to repeal don't ask, don't tell. Okay, people with different sexual orientations who are in the military were told don't ask and don't tell. Well, the people who were behind repealing that, what they did was they embarrassed the military for about the past 8 years, almost every day in the media, until the military finally said, okay, enough, we're doing away with that. Okay, so there is a precedent for this type of thing. That's what I think we should do. Put the pressure on the military to give these guys blanket amnesty, have them come out and tell us all their stories, and see where the chips lay after that.
You know they're never going to do that, though, Mac.
I know, but you see, the thing is if they don't do it, then we know they're hiding something. So, it's like I say, it's win-win.
Yeah. What do you think of my good friend Steve Bassett and his attempt to petition the White House to come clean with what they might know? So far it's gone unsuccessful. They've come out, they said that there's nothing to UFOs, or they don't know anything. Again, like I said, the current government probably really doesn't know anything. Right. That's an expected answer from them. But is he fighting the good fight, or is he just, barking up a tree that is not going anywhere?
No, he's fighting the good fight. In fact, I was on a radio show with him a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this. He's really fighting the good fight, and I'll tell you, that guy, he's dedicated 24/7 to this. Yep. Okay, I think maybe what happened was that they might have worded that petition wrong. I would have worded it. I wouldn't have mentioned extraterrestrials. I would have said, just like we were talking about earlier, I would have said, does the U.S. government have any information, or have they been in contact with any other kind of life force, any kind of other life, intelligent life other than human beings? That's how I would have worded it. I wouldn't have put extraterrestrials in there, because let's just say the government knows that the people behind UFOs are time travelers. Well, they can say, well, not extraterrestrials. You know what I mean? They should have generalized it more to do we know of any other kind of beings, intelligent life forms other than humans? If it had been worded that way, maybe the answer would have been different. Now, the other hand, too, is that, I think at first they thought that they were going to need just 5,000 people on the petition. Then they upped it to 25,000. I mean, right. Obama should have known that someone, when he declared we're going to be the open, we're going to be the petition government. If you get 5,000 names, we'll tell you anything you want to know. One of his advisors should have said, hey, ixnay on that, because you're going to have UFO people asking for this stuff, And then, Steve even told me, he said, once we put it in, all of a sudden our petition mysteriously, got lost from, the White House and all this stuff. And, they're really giving him a hard time. But, he's still in the fight. My hat's off to him. He's really dedicated, that guy.
No, he is. He's one of my heroes, and I've had him on the show. He's going to be on the show here in the next month. He is one of my heroes in ufology. He really does the work that needs to be done. And whether some people say that he's barking up the wrong tree, that he's not doing anything that's going to be fruitful, that he's never going to get anywhere with, somebody has to do what he's doing, because somebody has to kind of point the finger at the government and say, hey, we want to know. Right. I think if you keep doing that, eventually they're going to get to the point that they say, okay, they're ready to know. Let's tell them, because they've been telling us for all this time, we want to know. And it keeps growing. It's a movement. More and more people are getting involved. More and more people believe in UFOs and aliens and extraterrestrials. And even the Vatican has come out saying that aliens exist. They're out there.
Yeah.
The Pope believes in aliens. How crazy is that?
Well, the thing to do too is that. If they were really serious about it, we have this Hadron Collider in over in Europe. Cost $10 billion to smash atoms into each other to see what happened, microseconds before the Big Bang. $10 billion. Take $1 billion, and this is something they'll never do either, but take $1 billion and put it into UFO research and see what comes out at the other end of that. I'm telling you, we would be light years further in understanding it. Because ultimately it's probably going to be a scientific discovery, whether it's this satellite that's going to be able to look at the atmosphere or other planets, or just having real scientists go and look at the UFO evidence. But as we were saying before, talk about career suicide. If you're a scientist and you count on grant money and stuff like that, if you start going and investing in UFOs, forget about it. You're going to be working, you know what I mean? You're going to be...
in Antarctica, trying to find the Hollow Earth.
Yeah. That is like really, really career suicide. But it shouldn't be, but it is.
It really shouldn't be. It's such a shame how ufology and the whole phenomenon is so looked down on by the media and times will change. Do you think we will get disclosure in the next 50 years? Because I've had this discussion with Stephen, and I've told him many times that I don't think disclosure is going to happen in my lifetime or his.
Right.
I don't think it is personally. I think it's going to be something that maybe 100 years from now, then we'll start getting some kind of disclosure.
Well, it's you said it has to become a popular movement. It has to become something that a politician will recognize that he has to come out in favor of in order to get votes. And, how do you do that? That's the strange thing, because look at how people flock to UFO movies, science fiction movies and stuff, Yet when it really comes down to it, there is no movement. You have the Occupy Wall Street movement. Look at all those people who got together and did something, okay? Why isn't there a UFO movement for doing that? And I don't know why. It probably is just that, there were people who, like before I wrote this book, I was interested in UFOs. I always wanted to learn more about them, but I wasn't a Steve Bassett. You know what I mean? It really takes someone, and a lot of people like that to just be dedicated and devote your life to it. And we need 1 million Steve Bassetts to make something like this work. And where you're going to get 1 million people as dedicated as him, I don't know.
I'm going to tell Steve, I'm going to give him kind of an idea here. Maybe we should start a movement called Occupy ET.
Occupy ET, you got it.
There you go, and start occupying the extraterrestrials and turn the tables on them.
Occupy the Pentagon.
Those nasty buggers. There you go. That's really what it's going to take, though. In all honesty, all jokes aside, that's what it's going to take for them, I'm talking about the governments that know what's going on, to really release the information. But it's funny. A lot of governments across the world are releasing more and more documents. The British have released a lot of documents. The MOD have released a lot of documents over the years. What is your take on that phenomenon, the fact that these guys are coming out saying, well, we know about this and this and this, and they're kind of just telling us what they know, and they're opening their book, sort of.
Well, see, you have to kind of look at the suspects, the usual suspects. Like, for instance, as you say, the British have come out and they've basically said, okay, we're going to tell you what we know, okay?
Right.
And what it is that, a lot of this stuff can be explained, but there are things here that we could not explain. that's for what the British know. That's probably a reasonable position. The French, same way. The French don't have the same attitude as we have. They really kind of look into these things. They have a pretty prominent scientist in charge of UFO research, and he works for the government over there. Belgium, same thing. Brazil, very open about trying to find out what UFOs are, and Russia as well. Isn't it strange that it's really only in the United States where it goes the other way, where, if you type of UFOs, you're a nut, you're a kook, instead of being someone who's, scientifically curious, let's say, okay? That tells me that what the U.S. military is trying to say to us there is that we do know more than, we're letting on, and we want to keep a lid on this thing. So, don't come to us and tell us to be open and transparent about it, because we know more than the French, more than the British, more than the Brazilians, more than the Russians. So, maybe we do have a bunch of crashed, UFOs in S4 somewhere. Maybe we do. I don't know. But it's interesting that other countries are open about it. We're the only ones who are not really open about it. Even the Russians are more open about it than we are.
Yeah, it seems like we really are the ones that are kind of, tight-lipped about the whole subject. One thing that really blew my mind a few years ago, I was listening to Art Bell on air, and Art Bell was talking about one amazing human being who came forward with his own testimonies of the Roswell incident. And I'm talking about the deathbed confession of Walter Halt. Mm-hmm. And, his admission to what happened at Roswell sealed the deal for me. I mean, that told me everything I needed to know about the Roswell incident. And, we're going to go to a quick commercial break here, but, when we come back, I want to get your take on that admission, Mac. I want you to tell the audience what you thought of, Walter Halt coming forward in his deathbed, because, this is a man who was dying. He has no need to come forward with this information. There's no agenda behind this. He's not trying to sell books. He's not trying to, get a movie deal. Nothing. He is dying, and he simply wants to clear his conscience. We're going to come back, and I'll talk more to the author of UFOs in Wartime, what they didn't want you to know. Mr. Mack Maloney, guys, stick around. And if you want to get in on the phone, 786-245-8127. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, we are back on the Jackal's Head here on PSN Radio and SoFlo Radio. Tonight, we are talking to the author of the book, UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know, Mr. Mack Maloney. And welcome back, Mac. Welcome back, Mac. There you go, that rhymes. Speaking of hip-hop, and again, rest in peace, MCA. But welcome back to the show. And I asked a question before we went off air, and I know your beliefs on the Roswell incident. But to me, the deathbed confession of Walter Halt, that to me sealed the deal that something happened at Roswell. This man did not need to come forward. He did not need the publicity. He was not trying to get a book deal or a movie deal. And yet his confession it's impacted ufology, I think, as deeply as anything else that we've had in the last 30 years that have come out from anybody.
Right. Well, I'll just show you what I wrote in the book. First of all, I was read every UFO book I could get a hold of when I was a kid. And, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. And you never heard anything about Roswell until the late 70s, when Stan Friedman and other people, kind of revived it. And now I've never been down there, but I wanted to believe in Roswell for the longest time. In fact, in the early 90s, someone was going to organize an archaeological dig to go down to the debris field and treat it like an archaeological site and go through it, every piece of dirt with a fine-tooth comb, if you know what I mean. And I thought that was such a great idea that I volunteered to go down there to be part of that dig. And they finally wound up not doing it. But then, just one day I just was watching TV and there was some UFO show on, and it just showed where they took, where they take the famous picture of the debris and they match it up to the debris of one of those spy balloons that they were launching from there, and it matches up perfectly. It couldn't be anything other than what the tail of that spy balloon was. And so then I thought to myself, well, there was a cover-up, but the cover-up is that they were covering up the fact that they were launching these spy balloons there. So the only thing they could cover it up with was saying, well, we found a flying saucer. That's so much like the U.S. military, how they would do something. And then, since then, there's been lots of books written that, there were, 15 saucers have crashed there, and there's, dozens of alien bodies and so on and so forth. And all I can think of is, why are these UFOs crashing at Roswell? Why Roswell? I don't know. I mean, there just seems to be too many moving parts to the story now. And that photographic evidence really kind of sealed it for me. But I will say that, first of all, that doesn't mean that the U.S. doesn't have some other crash disk, some other, location. I'm not saying that. And I'd be glad to have my mind change, my opinion change. But, right now, I really don't think anything happened down there.
Let me give you my thought on what possibly happened at Roswell.
Okay.
I think something did happen. I think there was an event. I don't believe it was alien or extraterrestrial in nature. Remember, we had just come out of the Second World War, and a lot of the German scientists that were part of the Nazi scientists did come over to the U.S. and were working with the U.S. military. And what I believe happened was, I believe they tried to revive perhaps the Nazi UFO technology they're working on, because I do think there was some truth to the Hanabu and a couple of the other projects that they were working on. Not that they perfected it, not that they maybe even got it from aliens, just saucer-like objects, maybe perhaps done to try to panic the West, to make us think the aliens are trying to invade. Maybe that's why they were working on this type of technology. And when they came over, I believe the scientists were trying to revive that project. And what ended up happening was there was a crash of a test flight.
Mm-hmm. That could be. Yeah.
What other, what bigger conspiracy cover-up could there be other than Nazi-engineered UFO crashed at Roswell? Mm-hmm. I mean, you would cover that up with, aliens crashed. To me, that's a lot safer of a conspiracy than a Nazi-engineered UFO. I mean, that's a little bit safer to get away with than saying, it's a Nazi-back-engineered UFO or something, or technology that came from the Nazis. That's my personal opinion, because I do think there was some truth to the whole Nazi UFO connection. Whether they were really advanced in their project, whether they actually built the thing, maybe it was still schematics that they had just had, and maybe they just had the idea for it. There is video on YouTube, and YouTube is not the safest source for information, but there are videos that are pretty dated that shows U.S. government working on saucer-like crafts. Right. We have those crafts; they do exist.
Right. I don't. There's if the Nazis had. In fact, that your theory about Roswell is probably closer to, I would tend to believe that more than I would tend to believe that it was an extraterrestrial and that these things for some reason drop like flies in Roswell. But I think we make a pretty good case in the book that Foo Fighters were not Nazi superweapons. Did the Nazis have something on the planning board, on the drawing board, a saucer-shaped craft? It could be, because, as you say, the U.S. Actually working with Avro aircraft up in Canada actually built the flying saucer because they thought that it might be aerodynamically, preferable. It turned out not to be, but, they did at least try it. So who's to say the Nazis didn't do the same thing? But I'll tell you an interesting story about Roswell, though, and this is, once again, as we were talking off here, why do people pay attention to a certain thing and not this thing over here? Just going back to when we were talking about how UFOs have shown up over our ICBM bases a lot, especially in the 60s and the 70s.
Right.
And there's one case where the Air Force was building an ICBM base, and they had built the silo into the ground. They had poured the concrete, and everything had happened except the missile had not been put in yet. So they were guarding the place, and all of a sudden UFOs start showing up on a nightly basis over this rather isolated silo. And, it would scare the heck out of the guys to the point where the guys didn't want to go out on night duty because this thing was showing up all the time. They would call Air Force fighters from a nearby base, and, as soon as the fighters were approaching, the UFO would take off, the fighters would fly over, they'd go away, the UFO would come back. And it was just, scaring the heck out of people. And this went on for quite a while. Well, that location of that ICBM silo was in Roswell. Okay, this was in Roswell. No one ever talks about it. I mean, to me, that's scarier than, hey, a UFO might have crashed in a field in 1947. Right. Okay, so it's funny like we were saying, it's funny what people believe, and then they don't pay attention to stuff that might be just a little bit more important. I don't know.
Right.
But that's, once again, it's just like one piece of this whole big puzzle that no one can figure out. And
it is a huge puzzle. I mean, there's so many different layers to ufology, and for example, let's go a little bit to the far left here. Let's talk a little bit about Billy Myers, for example. What are your thoughts on the Billy Meyer case and cult-like status that he has at the moment?
Right. I don't want to say I don't put a lot of faith in that, to tell you the truth. I just don't put a lot of faith. I mean,
you definitely are a smart man.
Yeah, I just don't want to, say I don't want to alienate anyone, if I could use that word. But I mean, with all those photos and why aren't thousands of people on hand when those photos are showing up? I don't put much faith in that, to tell you the truth.
And it's people like Billy Myers, and folks that hoax stuff like he does. That really make it hard. It makes it hard for ufology to be taken serious. What would you say to somebody like a Billy Myers if you could, have him face to face? What would you say to somebody like him?
Knock it off. Knock it off, because, like you say, you're taking away from the people who are trying to look into this thing seriously. The people in Gulf Breeze, that was another instance, though that had kind of a strange ending. But taking these fantastic photographs, and then they find in the guy's attic after he had moved out. I don't even know his name. But whoever moved into his place after he moved out, found the stuff that he was taking these photos with. The unusual thing about that is, even after that hoax was exposed, people started seeing lots and lots of UFOs down in Gulf Breeze. So whether it just happened to be that this guy was pulling a hoax in a place where a lot of UFOs show up anyway, I don't know. But see, the thing is that when people come out and they pull these hoaxes, and I don't know if the guy in Gulf Breeze made any money. I'm sure Willie Myers probably made some money. I don't know if money is the reason you do it. Well, that's the world we live in. But the thing is that you take away from the work of, as we were saying, Steve Bassett. You take away from the work that people have done, like Jerry Clark and people have written, and Robert Hastings and Richard Dolan. These people. You take away from the scholarship that these people have devoted their lives to, by making some, screwy photograph, in your makeshift darkroom. So. But you're never going to prevent that. That's the thing. You're never going to prevent that. There's always going to be people out there hoaxing these things. Go on YouTube and just type in UFOs. There's some fantastic videos there. They look like trailers for movies, Yeah. But, let's face it, 99% of them are hoaxes.
Which is a sad thing to say. And, I was having that conversation with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, when I told him about the show, because he had never... you never known that I do a radio show, and I told him about the show, the kind of subjects we cover, and the UFOs and ufology is one of the subjects. And he asked me, do you think there's really anything real to UFOs? And I'm like, there is, but at the same time, about 99% of it is bunk.
Right.
It's BS. And the rest of it, well, it's very, very tiny percentage of that 1% that is probably extraterrestrial in nature. The rest is alien, not alien, but, aircrafts that we've created. Mm-hmm. They just look extraterrestrial. Like the stealth bomber, for example, which was mistaken as a UFO for a long time before we said, hey, this is our craft. We have this, this belongs to us.
Right. And, who knows what's flying around out in the desert these days. Someone told me that, and we were just talking about this the other day, that there's a secret base north of Area 51 called Tonopah. Mm-hmm. And not many people, it doesn't get the press that, Area 51 is the most famous secret base in the world, right? Everyone knows about it. It's supposed to be a secret base. But they flew the stealth fighter out of Tonopah for almost 10 years before the U.S. government actually officially acknowledged that, we had such a thing, And then as soon as they acknowledged that the stealth fighter existed, and then it went and fought in the Gulf War, it was taken out of Tonopah and it was stationed at Holloman Air Force Base down in New Mexico. And I remember, and I asked a friend of mine who was a fighter pilot, ex-fighter pilot, why would they do that? They still want to keep it under wraps. He says, the only reason they moved it out of Tonopah is that something else secret was moving in. That's the only reason they would move stuff like that, and it's the same thing in Area 51. Like you said, the B-2 bomber with the stealth bomber was out there flying around for a long time. People would see it and they go, what the heck is that? Because it's so strange looking.
Right.
But then when the military came out and said, okay, we have this, and now they're all based in Missouri, well, what took its place? Something took its place,
Correct.
And God knows what that is, but people see that, and the first thing they're going to say is, this thing is from another world because it looks so strange.
And it could just be from us. That's the incredible part. It could just be something we created for heaven's sake. I mean, we really don't. It's funny. We really don't like to give credit to human beings for being very unique and brilliant minds and creating just amazing things. Technology, whether some of it might have come from an extraterrestrial ship or not, we had to back engineer that, and just to figure that out, it's amazing. But let's just say that we created everything that we know as technology. Why take that away from us?
Right.
Human beings should get the credit. We did create a lot of the stuff, and technology is growing at an incredible rate. It's funny, in 100 years from now, if there was time travel from 100 years to now, from then to now, it would look like magic, the type of technology that they have. So who knows what we'll have in 100 or 200 years. Do you think, technology will ever get to the point where, traveling to another planet could be as easy as turning on a computer and,
and going,
logging in and just going somewhere,
Yes, I think I think it has to be like that. I think that there has to be some kind of discovery to figure out a way how we travel vast distances by not going
anywhere. It can't be on a rocket ship.
Right. It cannot be on a rocket ship. It just can't be on a rocket ship. It's impossible for it to be on a rocket ship. It has to be another way of figuring out how to bend time or wormholes or something like that. It has to be the difference between a covered wagon and a supersonic jet. It has to be an even greater leap than that. Because we're not going anywhere in a rocket ship. Okay, we're going to the moon, maybe to the Mars. It takes a year to get to Mars, and we're not going very much further than that in rocket ships. We got to figure out another way of doing it.
There was a great movie that came out in 2001 called K-Pax with Kevin Spacey, where he played alien called Prot. Amazing movie. And the idea behind the alien in that movie, I thought was brilliant. That these were light beings. Let's say that they traveled, the speed of light. They traveled right through light, and then when they got to this existence, they would take on the body of a human being. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting thought in itself, but how practical that would be for us. Traveling, it can't happen. We can't go the light speed. Right. I mean, we'll disintegrate.
Right. I mean, the idea that light itself is intelligent, is not that far-fetched. There's a famous experiment that I've seen done on these shows, and I've read about it, and it's very strange, where you take a thing that can shoot light particles, okay, and it's in a box, let's say, and you have this gun that shoots light particles, and you put a piece of cardboard with two slits in it. Have you ever seen this? Where they shoot the particles and it goes through the slits, and then you can see where it hits on the back wall, let's say. Now, if you're watching that, then the light particles hit the back wall in straight lines. Okay?
Right.
If you're watching it. If you cover that up and you're not watching it, and you run the experiment and then you take the lid off and look, the light patterns are scattered on the back wall. So it's almost like the act of you watching this experiment changes the result of the experiment. And, physicists have known this for years, but they cannot figure this out. And what does that mean? I mean, there is a chance that, there's some kind of intelligence to light particles. There's a chance that there's some kind of intelligence to atoms. There's another thing that Einstein called scary motion at a distance, where you could take an atom, you could take like hydrogen, for instance, and separate the two atoms in it and separate them by a foot or a light year. And if you if you nudged one with your fingernail, let's say, the other one either a foot away or a light year away, it would rattle too. Okay, what does all this mean? What does all this mean? I mean, we think of intelligence as how we are, how some animals have intelligence, and so on and so forth. There's a good chance that light particles, atoms, have some kind of intelligence. We just can't comprehend it yet.
Well, Mac, don't forget, we really don't know anything about space, and we know very, very little. I think we know maybe 3% of everything that space. That involves space. I mean, and that's a very small percentage.
Yeah.
If that. I mean, there's so much that we don't know. We don't know how even gravity really works.
Right.
We know that it's there. We know that we're, affected by it on an everyday basis, but why is it there? We really don't even know that. We can't even figure out, certain things of this planet. How, why does it rain? Why does the planet go in circles, just constantly? Why are the planets, circling this ball of fire in the middle of our, of our galaxy? We really can't explain none of these things. So we know very, very little. And you're right. I mean, it's amazing to think that there could be some kind of intelligence in light itself.
Right. Right. I mean, it almost seems like, that's the case, and as you say, hundreds of years ago, they thought that, that gravity was a force, okay, that it was actually like a force like magnets. But now it turns out that they say, well, what it really is that, the sun is actually bending space time, and we're just going around this. They always show like a basketball on a sheet. And, you go around the sun endlessly because the sun is distorting time-space. Well, okay, that sounds as good now as 300 years ago when people were saying that gravity was like a magnetic force, okay? Well, what's the theory going to be 300 years from now? You know what I mean? They're going to say, a basketball on a sheet, that's a bunch of baloney. It's actually this, And then we're kind of not as smart as we think we are. The theories are only as good as the intelligence of the people around on that particular day.
Oh yeah,
that's a strange that's a strange part of human evolution.
It is, and I think that you hit it right on the head when you said we're not as smart as we think we are, because it's always going to keep changing, and it's always going to stay in theory. Because honestly, we're very far away from being able to answer even half of the grand picture that is space and time and reality and everything. Mac, we're almost out of time. I want to thank you so much for, spending your time here with us. And I want to give you the opportunity to really, give out any links you want to give out, promote everything. Give everybody your information so they can find your books and buy them, which is the most important part.
Well, the book UFOs in Wartime is published by Penguin Books, so it's at every bookstore across the country and Canada. My editor always wants me to remind people to please patronize your local bookstore. But if you can't get out to the bookstore, then just go to Amazon.com and type in Mack Maloney, and it will pop up, and order it that way. Or you can go to MackMaloney.com, which is our website, which you can order the book there too. But it also shows you all the other books that we've done and a few other things that we're up to. So Amazon.com is the best place to get the book. MackMaloney.com if you want to learn a little bit more about it. And
do you have a book coming up now in the near future, or are you working on a follow-up to this book?
Yeah, working on a follow-up book. My editor just told me the other day not to give out any details about it.
Okay.
And, that's a little more mysterious than it probably is,
Yeah.
But it should be out this time.
Keeping secrets already, huh?
Well, I don't even know why, but, I got to do what they say. So it'll be out probably around this time next year.
We'll definitely keep an eye out for that, and definitely come back on the show so we can promote that book. Yeah. Mac, it was an honor having you on here and a pleasure. I definitely want to have you back on in the future to promote other books and stuff. Please keep in contact.
We'll do.
Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot, Angel. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to do it.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Okay,
have
we'll talk to you soon.
Night.
Bye.
Bye. That gentleman is Mack Maloney, again the author of UFOs in Wartime: What They Didn't Want You to Know. Hey,
this is Mack Maloney, and please visit us at MackMaloney.com.